We will now call upon Shep's granddaughter, Mona Scott, who is going to deliver the eulogy.
I would like to share with you today a few ditties about my granddad. Where do I start? 129 years ago, a midwife made a promise to a dying mother that she would take her newborn infant and raise it as her own. That midwife was Mrs. Nellie Scott, and that baby was Shep's father, George. On that day, a cruel twist of fate took away our Miller surname forever. His grandparents, Calvin and Nellie, were so monumental in his life. He always said he was raised by his grandparents, and they doted on him, and he never felt anything but love from them. Blood did not enter into it. He was taught their values, and at the young age of 13, he sacrificed his education and left school when his grandfather had a heart attack, staying home to run the farm. He knew it was the right thing to do. After years of working in the wood, lumbering, he yearned for a better life. He signed up with the Royal Canadian Air Force during WW2 and quickly enrolled in night school, where he was eventually able to complete his grade 12 and fulfill his dream of flying planes. A big dream for a little boy from Londonderry, but that was him, a dreamer. Some dreamers just dream, and some make it happen. My grandfather was a visionary. He could look at something and just know that it was going to be the next big thing, and he would have to have it or do it first. He loved gadgets. He loved figuring them out and knowing all of their features and functions. I'm still not sure why he bought a GPS, as he knew every spot on the mountain, but he wanted one, and he got it. He was given the gift of a watch as a boy, which was a pretty big deal in those days. His mother went out of the room and came back to find it all torn apart. He was trying to figure out what made it tick. It never worked again. I'm guessing she never actually gave him a chance to fix it. I have no doubt he would have eventually. Anytime something was broken, you could go to him, and he would quickly answer, "I'm sure we can rig something up." And it would be we. He would make you a part of the process. He would teach you how to fix things and show you that you don't throw something away just because it's broken. He managed to break quite a few things in his life. How could he not? He was a rambunctious one. My grandmother would say, "I don't know what that man's going to do next." Her favorite story was the one of stumped potatoes. Her grandmother had told her of how when they cleared the land on Westchester Mountain, the fields weren't ready for plowing the first year. She had planted potatoes next to every stump. They were the biggest, best potatoes ever grown. Helen had always wanted to try this secret method. They had just bought the lake house, and Dad had cleared the lot below the road several weeks before. One day, while Dad was at work, she went down and spent the whole afternoon fighting flies and planting potatoes next to every stump. She was exhausted and finally sitting down, resting in the house, when in drove Dad. He jumped out of the car, went straight to his bulldozer, crossed the road, and proceeded to turn over every stump on the lot. We heard that story 100 times, and Mom never got her stump potatoes. Perhaps someone here can give it a try sometime. Another bulldozer story worth sharing was just told to me by one of our oldest and dearest neighbors at the lake, Sally Langell Richard. It was a different lake back in 1969 with no access to the backside whatsoever. Sally's mom, Eva, had the only cottage in there, with nothing but a very long walking path to get to it, which took tremendous effort. Sally decided to ask Shep if he could perhaps make them a road with his bulldozer. They went together to the proposed site and they walked it, and Sally explained to him how most of the land belonged to Scott Paper and that they would have to get written permission before they proceeded. "Do you think you could do it, Shep?" Sally said. "Oh, I think so," said Dad. Much to their surprise, the next weekend, the Langels arrived to find a road right into their cottage. In the end, there was a very apologetic letter written to Scott Paper explaining what had happened, and they were very relieved when no court case ensued. One of the many things that amazed me about my grandfather was the way in which he was able to adapt and thrive after losing his wife of 59 years. She had done pretty much everything for him as far as cooking goes. He had no skills in that department. He quickly embraced making meals, and although some of his combinations were a little bit out there, he enjoyed them, and that's all that mattered. His favorite was boiled dinner. I came home one night at about 3 a.m., looked across the lake, and was alarmed to see his lights all on. I rushed over, walked in with my heart pounding, and there he was, sat at the kitchen table, with a big pot and all of the veggies spread out, snapping beans. I said, "What are you doing?" "Oh, I couldn't sleep, so I thought I'd get a start on my boiled dinner. Sit down." And so I did to help him. I was, however, able to convince him to wait till morning to cook it. The level of exemplary independence that he maintained for these last 8 years is unfathomable. Grandad enjoyed playing jokes and tricking people. He had a great sense of humor, and if he could get one over on you, then he was happy. He often operated in stealth mode and would then sit back and revel in the satisfaction that his victims never found out or even suspected that it was him. So I am here to tell you all today, if there is anyone out there that received a special hunting license, deeming them incompetent in that regard, and granting them permission to tag one deer in the Shubenacadie Wildlife Park, the mystery is over. Those letters came from Shep Scott, and he beamed with delight during it all, especially when he heard through the grapevine that Lloyd Bogle had been given the blame for it. He was a prankster, but he was also a very caring man who looked out for his neighbors and friends. He watched, he noticed everything. If something was out of place or not the norm, he would let you know, or go himself and check it out. He was the neighborhood watch before it existed. In the early days of my relationship with Gary, we were a bit anxious to break the news. With the age difference, we did not know how people would react, and we just felt like keeping things quiet. Gary was a friend of my granddad, so that added to the complications, and I was not quite ready for his teasing. We never told a soul. You may say we were sneaking around. One morning, I went to pick up Grandad for a medical appointment. Just as I was about to drive away, I yawned. He says, "Oh, you must be tired from your hot date with Gary last night." I said, "What?" He said, "You were with Gary last night." I said, "No, I was not." He said, "Yes, you were," and he starts grinning. I said, "What are you talking about?" "Well, last night I got up at about 3:30 and I looked over and Gary's light was on, and I thought he may be having a bad spell or a heart attack. So I called and he never answered. So I got dressed and I drove over and his truck was gone. So I drove down the mountain, 95 years old, and his truck was in your yard." "No, you did not." "Yes, I did," laughing so smugly. "You did not," I said. "Yes, I did," full laughing now. "I know you didn't. You will never know if I did, and you will never know if I didn't." Yeah, just try and get one over on that man. That was one night I wished he had never had a driver's license, and there were a few other times I questioned it as well. I knew him pretty darn good. We spent a lot of time together, and I could instantly tell when something was up just by looking at him. One day I walked in to discover him sitting in the sun porch with a cat that ate the canary look on his face, so I put the questions to him. Turned out he'd been to Masstown Market in his truck, and he had collided with a pedestrian on the way home. He recollected how he hit me. I did not hit him, and his mirror was knocked off. I'm starting to go into shock at this point. The police were called. Grandad tried to get the gentleman to sit in his truck with him and wait, but he was having none of it. He frantically paced until the RCMP came and then raved to them how he was walking on the road and the truck ran into him. The RCMP did not seem concerned and informed this poor soul that it was actually illegal to walk on the road, and you can be charged for that. He refused medical attention, and they were both sent home. The next day, we were off to the Ford dealer for a new mirror. When we got back, Grandad handed me the bill and told me he wanted me to get that guy's address so we could send it to him. I said, "Don't push your luck, mister," and no more was said about that. One might think that a man his age would have trouble keeping his license, but I can attest to the fact that this is simply not the case. 2 years ago, when it was due to expire, he was starting to panic. He said, "I have to get my license renewed." And I said, "I'm not helping you. You're on your own. I'll go with you, but you have to go up to the counter yourself." It is one of the only times that I have actually seen fear in his eyes. He stood there. They said, "Mr. Scott, do you have any trouble using your eyes, your ears, your hands, or your legs?" "I beg your pardon?" The girl raised her voice. "Do you have any trouble using your eyes, your ears, your hands, or your legs?" "Oh, no." His picture was taken, and he was told to have a seat. He came back to join me, and he wore a smile you could see a mile, if only I had my camera. I said, "You are not out of here yet." They called him back up and handed him a license valid until 2017. As we were leaving, he said, "Let's get out of here." I shook my head in disbelief. He drove his last drive on his own in his beautiful Lincoln in January, 2 months short of 100 years of age. If I could describe my granddad with one word, it would be pride. He was so proud of his family, his home, and the life he had made for himself. He truly made it himself. He worked so hard, but managed to play even harder. He skied till he was 86. He rode a bicycle at 96. He never held a cane till he was 99 and a half, and that was when we made him do so. He was a sharp-dressed man who always traveled in style. Every pocket of every coat was filled with candies to offer to a little child if he saw one. I can honestly say, but for the loss of his daughter Susan, he had the perfect life. He believed in an afterlife. He believed in angels. There must have been many protecting him here on earth, as he had countless close calls, too close. He would always say, "It was not my time," and I was always so glad that it wasn't. There is a verse from the village blacksmith, one of the many poems that he memorized last year that I have chosen to end with. It says it all. Toiling, rejoicing, sorrowing, onward through life he goes. Each morning sees some task begin. Each evening sees it close. Something attempted, something done, has earned a night's repose.
Thank you, Mona. It must have been very hard for you to do, but excellent job. And I'd like to add in there, too, that Shep was well known for his generosity. Just recently, he supplied and had installed a no cost to our lodge, a chairlift for the benefit of his brothers who could no longer climb the stairs. And just one day the phone rang, and that's what he wanted done, and I went and saw that it was there, and Shep took care of the bill and never saw a bill for it. That was Shep.